Hello everybody, my name is Roxtus.
And I'm Soulgale.
And welcome back to Warframe. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Alrighty, Titania, how to...
Titania!
So, excuse my voice, I have a little bit of a sore throat, but hopefully I can enunciate properly. Alright, so Titania, how to acquire. So you need to be able to go to the Silver Grove. You'll get all of her components through this quest. If you lose parts or if you sell the parts, that's not a very good option because it'll take you a while to get them back. It's not as painful as, who was it that we had earlier?
Chroma.
It's not as painful as Chroma, but it still takes quite a little bit of time and effort to get all of her components back. So definitely do not sell her parts. Titania is a collector. She's a very good collector and a very good collection. And as well, she is a very good distractor. She is a very good distraction tool. She has a lot in her kit to just keep people from focusing on your allies or trying to get on top of your allies. So very useful on just overall keeping the enemy distracted. Should we take a look at the abilities?
We shall.
Alrighty. Passive. Titania generates health for herself and nearby allies every time that she casts an ability. So, as long as you're within a 15-meter range, you'll start to regain health. This is 4 health every second. So, accumulation at the end of 20 seconds, you'll get a full 80 health back. This is actually greater than the aura rejuvenation, which rejuvenation heals back 3. This heals back 4. So this is super useful, especially because you can spam her abilities most of the time. So this is very nice for healing. Another thing to take note, which isn't really described in any of the other abilities, none of the other abilities actually mention it at all, and is kind of just an unknown passive, and I don't know why they didn't write this in here, but there is a modifier or a modification that they did to Titania where she has a longer roll distance and a longer bullet jump distance as well. And I had to do some testing myself. I went into the similar cron and I made sure that I'm not cheating at all. If you press forward on your roll or on your jump, you'll go further than if you didn't press forward. So definitely don't press forward when you're testing this out. Another thing too to note is if you have your bullet jump reticle aimed at a certain angle, whether it's down more, you'll jump less distance. If you have the bullet jump reticle aimed upwards, you'll actually jump longer. So keeping the reticle in the same position, your starting position at the same position, and making sure that you don't move during these type of testings is definitely critical because you can get varying or different results. But it was very conclusive. She does have longer rolls and she does have longer bullet jumps. And this is really weird that throughout her entire kit, it doesn't say anything about longer rolls or longer bullet dashes, but it's here. This should be written in. I don't know why it's not, but it is what it is. Spellbind. Enemies fumble their weapons as they are whisked into the air. Nearby allies become immune to status effects. Hold the ability to cast the immunity onto Titania. Drain is 25 energy. Range is 50 meters. This is the casting range. Radius is 5 meters. So the area that is actually affected by the ability is within 5 meters. And the duration is 16 seconds. Now, interesting things to note here. The radius is basically the same range as, I believe, Frost's Snow Globe, unmodified by ability strength here. I did a little bit of a play testing. I was like, how does this work? Basically, if you are in the area, you get hit by the ability. There is no residual or residing area beyond that. As soon as you cast it, whoever's in the range of it gets hit by it. It does not stick around. It does not stay around. It's just immediately on cast when you're in the area. And as long as you've been hit by the ability, you can walk away and you can just run away for as far as you want to go, and it'll still preside on the ally. So this is super nice when you want to just cleanse status effects, and it has a nice long duration of 16 seconds where you'll just become immune to status effects and you're just nice and unkillable at that point. Especially when you come into effects like viral or toxin, this is very effective. And same thing with even heat. A lot of players have aggravations toward heat, especially when you're trying to go throughout the Grenier ships, and especially electricity. There's arc traps as well. This is a pretty good one just to make sure that you do not get hit with any status effects, and the duration is wonderful because it keeps it on repeat. Thing about Sarand, when you do Sarand's molt, it only happens once, and then if you get hit by another status effect right after you cast, you have to recast molt all over again to cleanse the status effect. This just makes sure that you're immune throughout the entire ability from status effects. So this is very, very cool. Very unique. Tribute. Cycle through and extract one of 4 buffs when cast onto an enemy. Thorns reduces incoming damage. Dust degrades enemy accuracy. Full Moon increases companion damage. Entangle slows enemies within range. Drain is 25 energy. Damage on cast is 500 damage. Range is casting range. This is 25 meters. Debuff duration is 12 seconds. Now, I gotta stop because I have to fully explain the debuff here because it's not written in the ability. I had to do some math myself to figure out what the heck does debuff do, because throughout the rest of the ability, it doesn't describe what debuff is. If I didn't know any better, I would say I just don't know what this actually does. But I actually did some testing and I figured it out. When you hit the unit that you want to extract your buff from, that unit, then if it survives the initial 500 impact damage, will then get a debuff applied to it. This debuff negates its damage and only its damage to you or other allies by 33%, approximately 33%. So this is kind of interesting because I actually did some math here. It's 529 base damage without the tribute on the unit, and then as soon as tribute is applied to that unit, the unit degrades its damage down to 397 damage. So if you take that, it's 529 over 397, and you get 33% increased, or actually decreased damage. And if you use the multiplier 1.33 by 397, it goes right back up to the full damage. So it is a 33% damage reduction. I wish they put that in the ability, because if you didn't know any better, you would have no clue what the debuff is, how it's applied, or why it's applied. And just saying debuff duration and you don't give any further explanation on what it actually does, sorry, but I don't get it. If you're not knowledgeable, then you won't know what debuff duration means. It's just not written down. That is what it is. Effect radius is 35 meters for your aura. When you get your buff, it'll affect a radius of 35 meters. The effect duration is 120 seconds. Now you can actually pick and choose which of the effects that you want. You can get Thorns, Dust, Full Moon, or Entangle. Thorns gives you a damage reduction of 50%, but not only does it not do a damage reduction, but it also does 50% of that target's damage back to them. So this is kind of interesting. It's basically Trinity all over again, except for instead of a 75% damage reduction, it's 50%. And instead of 100% of the damage that they deal to you getting dealt back to them, it's only 50%. So half of the damage that they're dealing to you goes back to them. So very interesting, but they did not also put that down in this ability. And even in the written dialogue, they don't state any difference. Thorns just reduces incoming damage. It doesn't say anything about retribution damage coming in and going back into that unit. So that's very interesting. They didn't write anything down. Again, try to be more descriptive about your abilities. I don't know why you don't write these things down. Dust negates the hit chance of enemies within that 35 meter radius. So within 35 meters, all the enemies will have negative 50% hit chance. Or if you've watched Nyx, this is the same thing as accuracy. Only this one gets a 30% additive bonus instead of Nyx's passive 20%. I don't know why a passive is not as great as a main ability, but again, that's debatable. Dust adds a negative 50% hit chance. It's pretty interesting to note that there isn't really all that much difference from the accuracy. There is quite a bit more of the projectiles going off to the sides or just going in random directions. So that's pretty interesting to note, is that is pretty much 1.5 times the bonus accuracy loss as Nyx has, and it's still kind of negotiable even at that point if it will hit or if it won't. Full Moon adds 75% companion damage, 50 health to those companions, and added 50 armor to those companions. So it just kind of buffs your companions. Not all that useful, but especially if you're trying to keep your Helios alive, or your carrier, or any of your sentinels or your companions, just to make sure that they just don't go down as easily, this definitely does help. Entangle just reduces the speed of enemies by 20%. This is not fire rate or attacking speed. This is just base movement speed. So a little bit clarification there would help, definitely, because if I said overall speed, which that would almost seem like what it implies, then it would hit everything across the board. This isn't attack speed. This is just specifically movement speed. So having a little bit more clarification there would definitely help. Added negative movement speed. So across the board, effect radius is 35 meters. That affects the area. Thorns also gets applied to your allies, so that your allies are basically all trinities now. Dust just makes sure that everyone doesn't get hit. Full Moon increases all of your companions, even allies' companions get that bonus. And Entangle just reduces the overall movement speed of all enemies. Each of these has its own effect, and you can simultaneously have them all active all at the same time. This is really, really interesting because per buff, it adds an additional Razorfly onto your ultimate. So your ultimate actually only has 6 Razorflies to begin with. When you activate all of these abilities, you get an additional 4, because there are 4 buffs here, 4 additional Razorflies onto your ability. And the way you can actually see this is you just deactivate and activate your ability after you've done all your different effects, all your different buffs, and you'll see instead of having 6 drones or Razorflies, you'll see that you have now 10. So that's really interesting. Again, they didn't say that in here, so something that could be using a little bit more detail on. Another thing to note is that your tribute, when you're trying to go get your buff, there's a little enemy visage or image up above in the air. This lasts for 15 seconds, although it's not stated. I don't think it's really necessary, but it does last for about 15 seconds. And yeah, I would have to state a note though on effect duration. Same thing with Titania or Trinity or Chroma. When you're talking about an effect duration, especially with Trinity, Trinity's base ability duration for Link and or her ultimate is, I believe, either 15 or 12 seconds. Okay, 15 or 12 seconds. So you can get it up to a full 30 seconds, which is okay, but you have to spam the abilities quite a bit. When you're looking at Chroma, you can get the duration all the way to 60 seconds, which is pretty nice because you don't have to spam it all that often. This is really, really nice when the effect duration is above 90 seconds. 90 seconds for me is a breakpoint where you have a very good duration where the ability lasts for a good amount of time, where you're not seeing the ability fall off very quickly or having to recast the ability. So this effect duration of 120 seconds or 2 minutes is very useful because you don't have to recast it for a long time. You can just hit the buff, and then as soon as the buff goes away, cycle to your next one and just keep on recasting those abilities. This is awesome, especially when the effect duration is 2 minutes. Especially above 90 seconds, that is very, very good. I kind of wish Trinity and or Chroma had this. This is pretty useful, having more duration. Lantern. Create a swarm of razor flies that transform an enemy into an irresistible floating beacon, attracting witless comrades before exploding on command. Drain is 75, range is 25 meters, casting range, duration is 25 seconds, damage per second is 350 damage, heat damage, radius is 2.5 meters, so the damage per second is around the target that you put up as a lantern. Enemies will then get attracted to that unit, try to fire on it. It's completely immune to any damage. So they'll just get up right and snug with it. And that radius of 2.5 meters is the area in which they'll get damaged by that damage per second, the 350 heat damage. So they get close enough, they get burnt. I almost think of this as a moth to a flame. The moth gets too close, it gets attracted. This is why she's such a good distraction, is those moths keep on going to that flame. They are not interested in anything else, your allies or you. They're interested in that light and they can't see anything else. So this is a great way to actually distract as well. But the damage is 350 over the radius of 2.5 meters. So they have to be real snug and close to that unit to be able to be dealt that heat damage. Explosion damage of 2,500, an explosion radius of 8 meters. This damage and the range with it is affected at the end of the ability. So as soon as either the ability is decast or as soon as the timer runs out, the unit that is the lantern will then explode and it'll deal 2,500 damage within an 8 meter radius. The attract radius for enemies getting sucked into the light is 20 meter radius. That's a pretty good range for this ability. Frost's snow globe at 10 meters radius is 1/4 the area, 1/4 the area of 20 meters. So you don't really need to add very much range onto this, adding even at a base, because the range is so good. It attracts everything within 4 times of one frost snow globe. So for me, that's pretty good. Lanterns, I didn't know about this until I actually read up on the ability, but she can cast 4 lanterns simultaneously. So another reason why you really don't need a whole bunch of ability range with this one. Razor Wing, shrink down and take flight while razor flies attack nearby allies. Drain is 25 for the initial cast. Number of drones is 6, but as we've stated with Tribute, the more buffs that you have currently active increase the number of drones by 1, so you can get up to 10. Evasion adds 50% evasion. Again, with Tribute, there is a negative 50% hit chance, which is accuracy from dust. Then you add on another 50% evasion or negative enemy accuracy from Razor Wing. So this is kind of interesting because whether this is actually multiplied or if it's additive evasion or basically negative enemy accuracy, let's say that for instance it's multiplied, that's 75% reduced enemy accuracy. That's way higher than most negative accuracies that I've seen in this game. And then if it's additive, it'll be bonus negative 100% enemy accuracy. Their bullets will be flying all over the place. They will not be able to get a good clean shot on anything. So this, especially with her small frame, the smaller you are, the harder of a target you are to hit. This makes it so that pretty much she will never get shot, almost. Some of the time you might be hit by some projectile here and there, but most of the time you pretty much won't get hit. Damage is for your secondary exalted weapon is 160. Your melee damage from your melee exalted weapon is 200. Your drone damage is per each of the razor flies is 80 damage, and your energy drained per second while the ability is active is 5 energy. Now this is pretty cool because when you're actually in Razor Ring and you're paying attention to your razor flies, you'll notice that they'll actually focus onto the unit that's closest to you. So when you're flying around, just make sure you kind of stay in one area because the razor flies will kill enemies up until a certain level. I would have to say around 40 or so, especially with Grenier. When you start adding on quite a bit of armor, those razor flies just start up, won't kill enemies. So as soon as you hit that level 40 area, the razor flies kind of start falling off from there. Also, another thing that was interesting to note is you don't have a sentinel when you are in Archwing mode, pretty much here. So to compensate for this, they added a vacuum radius onto this ability so that you don't have your vacuum completely gone. So that's really nice. But again, it would kind of be nice to have Helios out on the table, but I see where they can get from this is just if you have vacuum and they couldn't have modded it or they couldn't have programmed it in to Titania, that does make sense. But again, like you're compensating for a Sentinel, why couldn't you say whatever the Sentinel's mods are, or even just keep the Sentinel back out on the table, keep the Sentinel back out on the table. Instead, they add a vacuum for this, which is nice, but I feel like there could have been a little bit extra work putting into just keeping your Sentinel out on the table, because the Sentinel is useful in most cases, especially trying to get meta ray or anything else off, trying to heal yourself. That would be useful instead of not having your Sentinel. So there, that is one of your downsides, is your Sentinel will just not be active at that point in time. Alrighty, so shall we take a look at the build?
We shall.
Alrighty, so there are two different things we are looking for Titania. Two things, that is, she is a specific tool or kit to be able to be used by, and they are the Void Orbs. And I don't know which ones those are, so you're going to have to go through those.
There is the Mirror Defense, where you collect the little crystals for Citrine. And then Deimos, the Sanctum, and that one has a Mirror Defense as well.
So those ones drop the orbs.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Zeramon as well, I believe.
Yes.
For the Void Floods?
That would be either, I think it's Void Flood.
I think it's mainly the Void Floods, yeah.
Yeah.
And then as well, we have Plains of Eidolon. If you're trying to do your Riven for the Dragoon Hunters, that is also a very good spot for Titania as well. But mainly for these missions where they have orbs, you have to jump in midair trying to collect all these orbs, and there's a ton of orbs around the environment that you need to and or have to pick up. And Titania is super useful because of her fourth ability. She can just fly around and not having to jump and just hover like a helicopter and be able to pick up all those little pesky orbs. So that's super useful for Titania, especially with White Razor Wing, where she can just fly throughout the environment and pick everything up. So she's a really good collector in that case. So we're going to be looking at Vitroplast orbs for that. This is her collector outfit. We're going to be looking at Steel Charge. This adds your melee damage. Somewhat useful. If you're going to be using your ranged attack, though, you could go with something else like, let's see here, you got a secondary. Pistol Amp. So you could go with something like Pistol Amp if you wanted to increase your secondary damage, or basically in this case, her Dex Prixa Prime, which is her exalted weapon. So you could go that, but I do love my melee, so I'm going to be sticking with my melee. As you can tell, I do not have any form on this build. This is just my best idea of what you could actually do with your build. We go Arcane Guardian for more added armor. This is 75% damage reduction, more energy, so you just never run out of energy. With this build, we're going to be focusing on being efficient as possible so that we can fly out throughout the environment and pretty much stay in that form, because we really need to collect a lot of orbs and we can't have this ability going down. So we're going to be going as much efficient as we can. Add 50%, add 75%, but we're going to negate some ability duration here. That is actually going to affect our energy per second because we have a little bit negative duration. We will add that back with ability duration here, but then we're going to also negate it with Transient Fortitude and Unworld Intensified because we want power strength for our melee and our secondary damage on this weapon. So we are going to be buffing the power strength and we will add on Umbral Vitality to also up the Umbral Intensify. These two do very well together. Umbral Vitality gets upped another 30% from its base of 100, and Umbral Intensify from 44 to 55 when these mods pair. So very, very good. Maximum battery with, I would definitely suggest Primed Flow and Primed Sure-Footed, as you do not want to get knocked down. This is always nice. When you are in Arcwing mode, you will get bounced around if you collide with objects, and or if an enemy hits you with something, it will eventually just knock you around. Primed Sure-Footed won't stop you from getting knocked around, but especially if you get out of your Razor Wing, it'll make sure that you just don't get knocked down while you're in contact with the ground. So that is super nice to take note of. Now, for the build, I would actually recommend using Beguiling Lantern. This makes it so that attracted enemies, when you're using your lantern, take 100% more weapon damage. This is not additive, this is multiplicative. So this is really nice because it basically just doubles your damage, which is beautiful. So Lantern makes sure that the enemies just fire on one unit and they just are attracted by that one unit. This augment is for the attracted enemies that are firing on that unit. They will take more damage. So this is very useful just to make sure that you're not getting fired on and you're able to take care of those units. So that's what I would use instead of Prime for Sure-Footed and being able to put Prime Sure-Footed in the Elixir slot. As I have not upgraded my Elixir slot and I have no Forma, I cannot showcase that, but that is primarily what I would do with this build. And then again, we want our duration back. We want as much duration as we can. And along with that, all of her abilities take a very long time to cast.
Yeah.
Spellbind takes 1 second to cast. Tribute takes 1 second to cast. Lantern takes 1 3/10 of a second to cast. Razor Wing takes 1 1/5 of a second to cast. Actually, 2/5 of a second to cast. And by deactivating the ability, when you exit Razor Wing, it's 1 second. So all of these abilities take a long time to cast. So having more casting time would definitely be favorable in our favor. And especially for Lantern, we want to have this duration as long as possible so that everyone is distracted by that Lantern. So we want to get this buffed up to at least 30 seconds in duration. How we can do that? We can add on some Archon shards here. We can add on 3 reds, adding 15% ability duration. That will make us as efficient as possible when we are using Razor Wing. It'll go from 1.61 to 1.25. Any further added duration, it will not actually go beyond that. It will hard cap at 1.25. So as long as you have 100% duration, that will be fine. If you go below duration, it'll get more and more inefficient. So there is that. And with casting speed, so we added our reds here, 3 reds for ability duration, adding 45% added ability duration. That also upgrades our lantern so that it will last a whole 30 seconds instead of 20 or 25, 30 seconds. And then adding 2 yellows here would increase your casting times by at least 25 or 50% up to 75%. So that's really, really good. I use that as a standard for even Equinox or Mag. It just makes the casting so much quicker and it really does work.
Definitely, yeah.
Yes. So that is the Vitroplast orbs. For the Dragon Pilot, it is pretty simple. We are just looking at Lantern to be able to keep our Dragon Pilots up in the air so we could be able to kill them. If you have a Riven mod, and it has a prerequisite to unlocking that Riven mod. If I don't have any Rivens that aren't unlocked, here we go. So if I equipped this, it'll give me a condition to actually unlock this Riven. And the condition can be that it would be a Dragon pilot, that you have to kill a Dragon specifically in the air. And I had a hard time with this. I was like, how do I kill it in the air? There's no possible way. You'd have to shoot it midair while he's flying out of the sky. That's just ridiculous. Well, you can use Lantern. As soon as the enemy is floating around, they are immune to damage, but at the end of the ability duration, they will get dealt all that damage in full, and they can potentially just straight up die. So he's still floating in the air, which is the condition of that Riven, is the unit has to be floating in the air. The Dragon pilot has to be in midair, killed midair, to be able to fit the condition of that Riven mod. So this is perfect because it'll keep them in the air. But we don't want our duration to be 25 seconds waiting around for that unit to just die. You can recast it and it will immediately kill that unit, so you can recast it. But I just find it going negative ability duration works really the best, going negative 60%, negative 27.5. Make sure that it only lasts 3 and an eighth of a second. And that's really, really useful because then they just get out of the sky and you can just get those conditions. Super efficient, primed flow, umbrella vitality for more health, ability strength, we really don't care too much here, and prime sure-footed with steel charge. This is just making sure that you can get that Riven mod. There's nothing too much specific for it, but it's just for unlocking that specific conditional. Well, you were going to say something?
Yes. You can also have a Loki with full range, teleport switch, and then you can get it that way too.
Yep. So if you've seen our Loki build for Loki, you can go and watch that video. If you use a Loki for the ground and you're using switch teleport as you would for those hacked drones or those hijacked drones, you will be able to switch teleport with the Dragon pilot, pulling the pilot out of the aircraft, making the aircraft spin out of control. It'll just fall to the ground. And that Dragon pilot will then switch places with Loki being the ground. And the Dragon pilot will be all yours, Titania, to take Lantern, put it on him, hit him as much as times as needed so that he's dealt lethal damage, either deactivating the ability or that you have the ability duration low as possible, and he'll immediately die. So this is very good in tandem with a Loki, just making sure that you can switch teleport, hit the Lantern, and you're done. So this makes it very easy trying to get that conditional for Rivens.
Yeah.
But yes, the main one that we will be using is going to be towards Vitaplast orbs, and especially for using Lantern, especially if you're going for an endgame build, Beguiling Lantern would definitely be your best bet. The other augments just have too much insane speed, or they're just too finicky to be able to use. So this would be, in my eyes, probably the best augment for her. So going over her exalted weapons, what to do? How do I mod this? So with your Dex Prixa Prime, I would recommend using Galvanized Diffusion or Barrel Diffusion for 120% or even higher multi-shot. Hornet Strike for added 220% base damage. We want Primed Heated Charge, and if you have Convulsion or Primed Convulsion, I do not have Primed Convulsion,
Nor do I.
using both of these for Radiation. This is very good combo, especially because of the high damage. We will be using Lethal Torrent for added fire rate and multi-shot, Anemic Agility for even more fire rate, even though you negate some of that damage, Galvanized Shot for added status chance, and on kill that you'll add some more additive damage there. And then for the final mod, I would not go Magnum Force because it just negates your accuracy. It's not as noticeable, but she does have quite a bit of widespread, especially with the accuracy being 23. And I just don't know about this one. And it actually maths out that pathogen rounds would actually be more damage in the end than Magnum Force. So I would definitely use pathogen rounds in this final slot here, adding on the toxin status effects, which would completely ignore Corpus's shields. It would just straight up kill him. So that is wonderful right there. So this is what I would do for the Dex Prisma Prime. For the Dwada Prime, you're looking at pretty much the exact same build as Valkyr. If you have not seen Valkyr's build, you can go ahead and watch that. I would do the exact same mod setup. No real difference. We still have the same negatives. We cannot use Weeping Wounds for status chance. We cannot use Blood Rush for the critical stacking multiplier at 4.4% added increased critical, which adds up to 5.4 if you're doing the base multiplier. But this is what I would do. Is just exactly Valkyr's build. I would, instead of primed pressure point, use sacrificial pressure, because we do not have blood rush, and the sacrificial steel adding the little bit more critical chance here would definitely take the cake. Prime Fury for added attack speed. We are going to be going Organ Shatter for more critical damage, Prime Fever Strike for Toxin, and you can see a running theme of radiation throughout this build. We are going to be using Voltic Strike and Volcanic Edge. Same thing as Valkyr's build. We're going to be trying to add back some of that status chance so that we can use Conditioned Overload in this final slot here. Now, with this, I would not be going with a basic Molten Impact or Shocking Touch, because you don't get the added status chance. And especially with Conditioned Overload, this is very useful for stacking your damage and making sure that you can do quite a bit of damage. And even though we could actually add on Quickening here, and it would do about the same amount of damage, I vote for not, because it just doesn't do as much damage. You're already at 1.68. It does kind of suck on attack speed, I know, but it does overall do more damage. If you're feeling like it, you could definitely do Quickening, but instead of Voltic Strike or Volcanic Edge, I would just add on some more status chance by either, let's see here, melee prowess, which would add 90%, or you can add on Virulent Scourge so you keep that toxin damage, because if you have to negate one of these two, they will then combine with the toxin and make a completely different element. And I really like that toxic damage. That toxic damage is beautiful for killing Corpus.
It is super duper nice.
But for me, I don't use Titania all that much, so I'll be using Radiation, because the math doesn't lie, and this does really good damage, especially you're trying to get as much status damage, and even that 40% added attack speed doesn't compensate for just having a little bit more status chance, being able to pop those statuses and get Conditioned Overload off, dealing more damage. You could say one way or the other, yeah, attack speed does help, but at the same time, Conditioned Overload definitely, and adding more statuses here. But yes, I believe that is all for the build.
Yeah, I only have one build.
Yeah.
And that's with Thermal Sunder.
Oh, yeah, you could do Thermal Sunder as well. I haven't read the ability or done anything on that. What does it do?
It does heat and cold, which if you do heat and cold together, it makes blast.
And which ability? Lantern?
Yeah, I switched out Lantern because I don't use Lantern at all. I never used Lantern when I was playing Titania.
So there you go. Like, you could use Thermal Sunder. I haven't used it all that much, but you could use a different ability to be able to wipe out rooms. Higher level though, it does help though with that Lantern, being able to distract enemies, because that is really, really useful. I'd consider every ability for her to be pretty useful, but if you're going to use Thermal Sunder, I would almost replace the first ability, because even though you're negating status effects, you could deal more damage with that Thermal Sunder. But yes, all right, you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Mutt. So you use Thermal Sunder for her.
Yes, I do. And I like Thermal Sunder.
Life support has been cut off. I'm trying to choke you out.
Wow.
I'm sending auxiliary life support.
So I'm going to get an enemy within this plateau as a lantern.
And it just burns them.
Yeah. Alright. So I've got all my abilities active now. I'm going to use this. And he's going to float around for quite a while. Whee! I can hold the cast on myself. But that is pretty fun. Especially flying around the environment. I'm Peter Pan!
You're Peter Pan.
So you use Thermal Sunder, is that just for an armor strip as well?
Yeah, because heat does build up over time and it does do a lot of damage.
I'll have to review that. That might be viable.
And you are spamming her ability, so it does count for her regeneration.
I just don't know if it's actually more or less useful, because having it so that the targets are actually firing on the lantern is actually pretty useful, even at later levels, because they're completely distracted.
Nah. I just like doing a little bit more damage. And I like Thermal Sunder. That's just me.
Oh, yeah. And I got 10 razor flies, even though you can't see them most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, Thermal Sunder is not doing too bad. I do see a lot of damage numbers.
I got blasted.
Ooh.
Wah.
Okay, it's stuck. So I just mostly use Thermal Sunder just to like protect the defense target. Our objective.
Which is pretty handy though with the heat, because you can strip armor at least halfway. Wow.
Yeah, I can freeze people too. You want to see?
Whoa, are you frost?
Yeah. Aw, he died before I did anything. Yeah, see? I'm frozen.
Whoa,
I gotta do a new.
you got a shot.
Oh, I just did blast too.
Whoa. Don't heat it up. Yeah, freeze it. Gotta make it nice and cold.
You want me to freeze it more?
Freeze it.
Okay.
I gotta see this ice wave happen. Oh. This is Goss?
This is Goss's Thermal Sunder.
Wow.
So if you just tap the ability, it'll freeze him.
Wow.
If you hold it, it'll put him on fire. But if you do the ice with the fire, it'll do blast.
Okay.
So if you do this, and then this, it'll blast him.
Okay. Oh, shall we go?
Oh, yes, I was having fun.
Um,
Woo!
but this is very useful, especially if you're trying to do fine maneuvers and you're trying to collect a lot of orbs. This is very useful because it's just speed and accuracy, and she can just grab a lot of different orbs in a very short time span. How did you
Yeah.
get over there?
Are you lost?
My waypoint is broken. It has been broken for a very long time.
Right here.
Ah, I get confused so easily.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a W1.
I really like Goss's Thermal Sunder.
Right? Ah, so there you have it. This is Titania. She does a really good job, especially when you're trying to get that specific for the Dragoon pilot, and especially when you're going throughout Deveri, or even the I forget what the place is called. The Zeramon 10-0.
Zeramon, yeah.
Especially when you're going out throughout the Zeramon 10-0 for picking up those little pesky orbs. She is very, very useful, very handy for that. For later levels though, I wouldn't consider her to be too well prepared. She would be better in a team where she could have someone armor strip or someone to actually help her deal damage. But beyond that, she is pretty useful. If she does have that teammate, she can basically keep everyone off of them. She can keep them away from her or her squad mates. That is pretty useful. I would have to see about Thermal Sunder. That actually might seem like a viable option because with the range intact, like you're at least stripping half of the armor. So that is pretty useful. But again, heat only strips half of the armor. So as soon as you start going to higher and higher levels around the 200 point or even beyond that, that's where the armor is going to start to catch up with you. And even with a minimal or 50% armor strip, that armor is still going to be there and it's still going to be tough to get through.
Yeah.
So even with Thermal Sunder, even with that, it's not going to go too far. But yes, she is very good for the tool that you need her to be.
Yes.
She is a tool.
She's a tool.
It's what we call in Warframe, you cheese it. Well, is that all the time we have for this episode?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes, and we will see you guys in the very next video. Bye-bye!
Bye-bye.